Commit to the play and don't feel like you're the worst one in the class.
It's really cool to kind of see them think outside of the box.
Sometimes those criticisms aren't necessarily right.
It's a great idea, but it has to be educational.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Room Podcast. I have my very special guest, Charlie Cole, here with me today, and we're going to talk all about Dungeons & Dragons and the creativity it offers to your everyday life. And now, a little backstory, I guess. We are Dungeons & Dragons pals.
Connoisseurs, really.
Yeah. This past year was my first year ever hopping into the game, and Charlie was in our party, and that taught me a lot of interesting things about like role playing and just like the silliness you can kind of get into with a group of friends. So I think you have most of the topic, so I'm going to let you start, and then we'll bounce back and forth.
All right. Well, I mean, I think you started off with a really good point about how when we would play together, just like the amount of situations that you find yourselves in is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that people really don't tend to realize about the game when they're talking about it with their friends or maybe people that are completely brand new, because I certainly didn't. Mm-hmm. It's like how quick you have to be in your response time and what you want to do.
Yeah,
and it's stressful.
There's not a lot of like there's decision time, but like because it's like it's live, it's right now. There's not like a key press or a like, do you want to do this? It's like whatever we say is happening. It's real. It's right now. So like when someone jokingly says like, I'll jump off the cliff. Well, you just killed your character. And the DM looks at you and rolls 2 d20s for damage or something like that.
I'm by no means are we experts in the game, so if we misspeak. No. So. Yeah. But I think it definitely taught us a lot. And not to mention that, I think it's a really great way to, because like this was the first time we met when we started playing D&D together, mm-hmm. and it really fostered a really good friendship out of the whole thing.
Yeah, I think so. Because like with the back and forth and the amount of like, I don't know, comedic relief in what we're doing. Because, I mean, okay, first of all, the fact that we were sort of strangers, you don't want to act like a total weirdo in front of another stranger. But then when you're sort of pushed into that situation, being like, you have to play your character. And so it kind of, not like a catfish situation, but it did kind of like put a veil in front of you, being like, well, I can act weird because my character's weird. It's not me, clearly.
Yeah, and I think it really allows people to come out of their shell, so to speak. Because, I mean, here I am with a person I've never met before talking about which spells I'm going to cast on my enemies and how high my charisma roll is, you know. It's just a great way to meet new friends and strengthen connection with friends you already have.
For sure. Mm-hmm. So how do you think Dungeons & Dragons is tied into your like everyday life?
Well, the reason I thought about it is I've always liked English. I've always been much better with words than numbers. Mm-hmm. But I found myself when playing D&D, I was a lot more inspired, to write stories. I started working on my own sort of a universe and campaign for one day when I'd be DMing probably in August when I leave to college. Mm-hmm. And it just really inspired me to get more into that mindset of like, what would these characters actually do? And what would their decisions be? And what are the impact of those decisions? Because that's something you really see unfold throughout the campaign that we played.
Oh, for sure. And like, exactly the same for me. Like after our first couple of sessions, I was at home writing the universe, how like the world worked, what the gods or the evil like beings in the world might do. And it makes a more three-dimensional story. Because, of course, you write in the universe, but then there's no telling what the characters are going to do, what the players. Mm-hmm. And so, like, you're trying to kind of evaluate every situation, being like, well, I want them to do X, but of course they're going to do Y. And then, like, you end up actually playing, and they don't do either one. They do something totally different, like something you could have never predicted.
Yeah, now you have to plan all around that new decision that you... Mm-hmm. And another thing is, it's a nice... For people that don't like to read or they watch movies, it's a nice sort of medium of entertainment, right? Because say you get bored while you're reading, where it's more involved than a book. But the characters and character arcs are much more dynamic that you would see in traditional cinema. Mm-hmm. So it's a nice medium for people to get into, especially if they want to get more into writing maybe. Or because I saw that in an article written by NBC by an actor who used D&D as a creative outlet for himself. It kind of opened his minds to new thought processes and how he could react to certain situations in a way that would... better his career.
And I think it's definitely a kind of game where like you almost need no materials, which is strange. Like you need a thing of dice and maybe like your character sheet, and really that's it. And like even though we're only talking about like words and we're just sort of goofing around on the table, these encounters, these environments, they're so vivid in my head. but no one has just like no one's shown me anything. There's no drawings. There's no anything.
We have a pencil, a whiteboard, and
Exactly.
some fancy. Oh, we could have a huge conversation about the dice alone. That's what truly fascinated me. And the D20, because the D20 adds like a whole layer of complexity to the game itself, because it's 20-sided die, 20 sides, so 1 divided by 20, so about 5% you're going to land on any given side. But when you hit that 20,
Oh, it feels so good.
there is nothing that can compare.
But there's nothing worse than the one.
Which seems to I don't know how it's statistically plausible, but always happens more than the 20.
And it's never like, oh, I opened the door, like you roll a 1, and it's like that doesn't happen. But it's like you have this enemy pinned. There's no way you could fail. Mm-hmm. The 1 immediately, and you're just like, well, I just somehow killed myself.
Or you're on your last leg. If you don't fight off this guy, your journey is over as an adventurer. You're a whisper from death. He gives you a lot of opportunities to succeed, and that's when the 1 comes out.
Yeah, for sure. And then like there's nights where it seems like everyone can't help but roll a 1. So like the entire party is just shooting each other in the back, and things are falling on top of you, and just like you can't win.
It's just absolute chaos.
But that's what I love about the game is like in traditional, like let's say like video games or even board games too, there's like not a lot of consequence. I mean, like let's say like in a multiplayer online game, like you shoot someone, you die, you respawn, no big deal. In this game, like you've now created a bond with this fictional character. And when they start to go down, your heart starts to race. You really feel there's a threat to like your person. And you don't want to see them die.
And that was another interesting thing. It's just the bonds that you form with these characters that you created yourself.
Yeah.
It's like it's crazy to think about. It's like I made this character. I know its backstory, his or her backstory, and her abilities. And now I've created like a story around her, and I'm gonna miss her when she's gone. Yeah. And it's kind of weird to say that, but you create a bond with these characters. It's really similar to that of a book.
Exactly.
That's why I always thought about it. Is like if you read your favorite book, and you kind of put yourself in the position of that main character, that's what it feels like to have your own D&D character sheet.
Yeah, it does. And the process of making a character is maybe the most tedious of the entire experience of the game, because like there's just a lot of like numbers and like, okay, well, you do this, you have this ability kind of thing. But once you get past that, like, and the DM is rolling you through the campaign, it feels like there's not a lot of effort required. You're just in it.
And that's pretty because it just really all it takes is to be creative. Because like you could have the best abilities in the world, but it really doesn't matter if you don't know how to use them correctly, right?
Yeah.
And it's like it's not like they're very complex or anything. It's just knowing when the right time to use them and when not to use them, and just because being creative can get you out of difficult situations. Because I know when I played my characters in particular, there was almost no attack spells.
Yeah.
I had 1-2 attack spells. And I went maybe 7 solid sessions without being in literal danger.
Dude, the legend of Jonesy.
Oh, the
legend
legend
of Jonesy. Your last
of
character was so good. Oh my gosh. My favorite situation ever is when we were about to fight like the main villain.
Oh, Dunwall.
And you transformed into his lover.
Oh,
Martha. That
was a legendary moment.
Oh my gosh. That moment alone was the highlight of the campaign, just because it completely turned it turned a normal boss encounter into a what can we get away with right now?
What's gonna happen?
And then when it finally like everything hit the fan, it was just like, this is worth it. This struggle is like, I don't even care if we die right now. This has made it worth it. It was amazing.
Well, because it was like any other boss encounter. You have this big tense build up to this man. Who's extremely skilled in many varieties of weapons. Stronger than any of our characters, easily. But we get there, and I'm transformed into a woman that was his former lover, impersonating his voice, barely succeeding with high rolls for a time that went on for way too long.
Yeah.
Before everything eventually crashed and burned. But it was definitely a moment that I'll fondly remember.
And like, I can't wait to eventually host my own campaign and like learn. I think watching how our DM kind of managed like the balance between his narration and when he was playing an NPC. Because like when you're playing a character, you don't have to worry about a whole lot other than keeping yourself alive. But then watching him try to like course correct when we started kind of getting a little too crazy, or if we stopped like following the main plot, and he would sort of push us back into order. I'm excited to take that role on, to understand like how I can like really navigate the story I want to tell, but let the story almost unfold organically with the characters.
I mean, I am as well, just to see, because Josh, he was an outstanding DM, and it's really incredible to see how someone could balance that many characters, and not to mention voices.
Yeah.
For when we encounter these characters, everyone had a unique personality and different motivations for a simple NPC that we're going to meet once or twice. And then another thing is, I remember one encounter we had where we had an NPC that he was meant to talk to, and I killed him. And there's a note you pick up off this NPC that it's just, it's the little details that he really leaves out, and little breadcrumbs that you and your party picks up along the way that really creates this universe.
For sure. And everyone loves like Easter eggs and little pieces like that in like a video game. And it's just such a different experience to play it vocally and just like in your head, because like kind of like how we have a bond with our own characters. Like, remember the shovel kid?
Yeah, that was the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay. Like, killing that kid was so unnecessary. And then like finding the notebook and everything, we're sitting there around the table like, oh no, what did we do? And like, that was so interesting. And especially like for how much, I guess, like of an introvert Josh is. And then seeing him come alive as the DM, he's narrating, he's up and he's moving and he's like animated. Like, seeing, like, they're two different people. DM Josh and graphic designer Josh, like, totally different human beings.
Oh yeah, if you tried to talk to Josh the way we talk and during a session, it would be like you're talking to a completely different person.
Yeah,
for
sure.
And that was what we were talking about earlier. It really lets people come out of their shell. So if they're not necessarily so, how could I put this? Like, you're being sociable, right? But you're not being necessarily social, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, like everyone in the room is like under the understanding that like, yeah, we're here to have fun, but like whatever you are kind of on the inside, like, is left behind. Like, it's not, you don't need to worry about like how you look, how you act or whatever. It's just like, this is the game, we're having fun. We can like accept each other in this kind of moment. Yeah,
and that was really important, is it allows you to be someone completely different. And it's like, I think, and the funny thing is, I think that everybody's character, they like to be someone different, but at the end of the day, it does kind of show your true colors.
For sure. Like, I think writing, especially maybe your first or even second character, you're trying to kind of write them from your own like vision of yourself in a way, like how you would act or maybe how you would perceive things.
I would imagine that it would be very difficult to write a character to that isn't anything at all like yourself, because it's like that old writing expression. It's like, write what you know, and you'll be a lot more successful that way.
And it's cool too, because like with these characters, since it's a fantasy situation, you can exaggerate different qualities. Like, I mean, my guy was very clumsy. Like,
falls with grace.
And so, like, I mean, in my day-to-day life, I think of myself very, like, laid back and chill and relaxed, but also very curious. So, like, my character was extremely curious to the point where he would just eat anything he found. But, like, he was always trying to, like, I don't know, be active and, like, jump on things and go all crazy, and then would ultimately fail.
Yeah.
Gracefully.
Yes. And... well, that makes me a little self-conscious, because I was wondering what you think about my character, my relations to my true colors.
The evil Jonesy.
Well, Jonesy was a legendary hero. I will always remember quite fondly. He had his flaws, and I believe I wrote on his character sheet was greed, selfishness, and daddy issues. And he was he was very selfish, but the legend of Jonesy will always live on my heart, no matter how many innocent bystanders he killed or women he pursued out of pettiness.
Yeah. So tell me, like, how did you get into the game? Like, were you invited into a session, or were you kind of curious about it at first?
Well, I knew about D&D because my brother used to be really into it, but I really didn't get into any sessions until one day I was at school and a friend of mine was filling out a character sheet. I was like, oh, that's cool. What is that? And we just started talking, and I found myself here.
I've always been curious about the game. I mean, like, it's a game way older than both of us. So
it's
like
79.
Yeah. And so like hearing about it, I was always like, that game's for nerds. But then like, okay, the people who like play Minecraft or Call of Duty and call themselves nerds, no. Dungeons and Dragons makes you a nerd.
Definitely.
For sure. But it's okay. Because it is way more fun playing Dungeons and Dragons than I've ever had playing any other video game.
Well, you can't even compare it. I mean,
yeah.
And I think you're right. You're not a nerd until you're surrounded at a long table talking about dragons and enemies with pencils and 20-sided dice.
Oh, for sure.
You can't call
Like-
yourself a truly experienced nerd, but
My first session wasn't even playing. I was just observing you guys play, and that like being kind of curious about it and then just observing a session how it plays out. Oh man, that will get you addicted. Cuz like starting like I guess from 0 to 100 going into the game might like intimidate you a little bit, but watching someone play, like finding a group that'll let you observe, then that really makes you want to get into it.
oh, and especially when you hit that first big move where you actually add something to the party and you help along the way, whether it be melting someone with acid splash or your 360 crossbow shots.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, it's really easy to get involved once you've started.
Oh, for sure. And then like at the end of every session, I was like, man, I'm not ready to stop. Like I want to keep going. And then like I would look so much forward to the next week and we finally meet up. And like that was a highlight of my week every single time.
I think the first session I ever played was Josh decided that we were just going to do, it was the first time I ever met Josh. And it was like, we're just going to do one big adventure in one session. And it ran from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 9 o'clock at night.
Oh my gosh.
Was when we finally ended the session, but everybody did not want to stop. Even after 5 hours of rolling dice and talking in fantasy jargon, you know, it just wasn't enough. And I think that really shows how it's sucked into the story. You really are.
And like I said earlier, is like there's no like Josh does an excellent job describing things, but he also pairs it with like some drawings he does himself. And I think that's wow, he puts way more effort in than anyone needs to.
Yeah.
But like I love that. Him drawing the maps or the facial profiles of these other characters. Even if that wasn't there, like if I never saw his illustrations, I could see these encounters vividly in my head. Like I was really there. I was really experiencing it. And especially when like you're rolling for initiative and you're getting ready for like a fight, you're like evaluating like the distance between enemies and like where your party members are and like any possible option you have to survive. And at the end of it, like you really do kind of feel like you just murdered 6 guys and you're just like, yes, I survived.
I did that.
Yeah.
Well, I think as first-time players for both of us, we were really lucky to have a DM like Josh, you know, to someone. And I think another underrated quality of a DM for D&D is that they have to be magnificent storytellers.
Yeah.
Which Josh wouldn't believe you if you told him this, but he really is.
Really, yeah.
He could really craft these characters and ambitions and what you want to do and like the whole plot line, because the twists and turns, we never saw what was going to happen. It was never obvious to us what any of us were doing. You know, it started off as a simple mission of kind of this ragtag crew of, you know, people that should not have been together.
Yeah. And even like seeing how established your party already was and then how we kind of integrated when my character came in, like it fit perfectly into the scenario you guys were walking into.
Oh yeah, no one ever even questioned it. It was just like, there's this new guy here, he's fine, he fits in, you know, and it really, there's a lot of qualities to that, because it's not only in the game, it's just how we welcomed you as a new member and just our friend group as it is, right? We meet every week. You know, we have to get along. And, you know, just like that, we were friends and getting along great. And I think that was another good thing that the game really did for us.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, the game has definitely come up in popularity over the last couple of years. I mean, there's always been a hardcore fan base, but now it's kind of cool again. And I'm excited to see like more and more, I don't know, not nerdy identifying groups actually playing the game and enjoying it, because, okay, I did say it totally makes you a nerd, but you don't have to be a nerd to play it. Like,
well, it's another one of those things where that label means something completely different now. I mean, you walk around, people are wearing NASA shirts, you know, SpaceX is cool. Everybody loves Elon Musk.
Yeah.
So like, I wouldn't be surprised if it expanded to tabletop games, especially in D&D. And it's just, I hope people will start seeing it for more than what it is, for, you know, instead of what they know it as.
Yeah. And I mean, I am a big fan of movies. I'm a big fan of video games and other things like that, like other types of media. But nothing is as like interactive in like world building than Dungeons and Dragons.
No, because I mean, how could anything really compare? Because everything's in your imagination. As we said before, you have a piece of paper and some pencils.
Yeah.
And the instruction manual, you know, it has its rules about different enemies and weapons and what to roll for what does what. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to here's paper, here's pencil, make a story, and have someone guide it.
How would you say that Dungeons and Dragons applies to, like, how could it, if let me rephrase the question. Someone new playing Dungeons and Dragons, what would the benefits be for them besides just an entertainment game? Like, would they become more creative overall? Do you think they would build this, like, kind of build their imagination muscle?
Well, I think it really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but I think that would definitely be the case. Just subconsciously, without even realizing it, you'll be more creative because you do something over and over again, and you get better at it. And same with creativity, because it's you're telling stories, you're making ambitions, and eventually, say like someone in my position, right? You're in English class and you have to write a piece or a story for your next paper. And I think subconsciously you're going to be like, well, the character would do this because of this and these ambitions, and it would just be, X plus B equals C effect on anything you do. And it just, not only that, maybe you could gain inspiration from that in other forms of art. Because, you see people who have these really strong, passionate feelings about D&D make like this beautiful character art and fan art, so to speak. And it really just, it drives people to be creative about something they love. And that's something, and it makes it easier to be creative when it's something you're passionate about.
Oh, for sure. Like, especially just in my personal life, like being creative is definitely my job now. Like and that's weird, but like, you kind of start to run out of it in a way. It's like willpower. Like you can only be so creative in a day until it feels like that fuel is gone. But at the end of what we met on Tuesdays or Wednesdays,
something along this.
So like at the end of a Tuesday, being creative all day, I'm pretty spent. And then going to D&D, we get some pizza going, we're having some laughs, and all of a sudden, man, I am 1,000% more creative immediately.
Yeah, and I would feel the same way. It was crazy. Like, I would come here sometimes after work, just exhausted. I'd work like 5 hours, get home, shower, come here, and, just revitalize with energy. Your mind's thinking 1,000 words a minute, just thinking what you can add, what you're going to find.
Yeah.
And just new things to explore.
And then, like, especially, like, we had pretty much 6 people in our group, plus like 3 or 4 NPCs. So you're sitting there waiting for your turn, like, I'm gonna shoot this guy, I'm gonna cast this spell, I'm gonna loot this thing.
Especially in combat, it's like, especially in combat in 6 people, and you roll the lowest number for initiative to decide who's going to attack first, and you're going around the table and you're just getting cold sweats in that boss fight, hoping something in the stars aligns correctly to not put you in some sort of dangerous position.
Yeah. And like one of the last sessions we had, we were all trapped in a very small room trying to fight off guys. We were not meant to fight. This was an encounter. Josh made it very clear
Totally optional.
afterward that he was like, "You guys were just supposed to submit. That was it. It was supposed to be illustrated in a way that you couldn't possibly win." And of course, one of our more brutish characters decided, "I'm going to fight everyone in this room."
I kind of want to say her name because I told her I was going to be on your podcast. Lizzie Allred. Miss Loots a lot.
Yeah, her character was a half-orc brute of a woman who just took no crap from anyone, and also just happened to be the world's greatest scavenger of everything.
Oh, yeah, I think this is another interesting point, is the weaknesses and flaws of all our characters. Like her character Onka, I think her flaw would definitely have been too strong for her own good.
Yes.
And that she gets into these situations because, I can take anybody on. I'm Onka. Dual Warhammer wielding 6'4" tall lady that can just annihilate anyone.
And it was interesting too, because in that last situation where we're in this small room, we're in the living room of some guy's house, being trying to be arrested by some order of not magic using people. My character is a ranged character, so my bow is not very effective in a living room. And there was a moment where I could have died. I'm surprised I didn't die. I hop up on a table, I was about to just shoot someone, and I get swept out and just pummeled into the ground. And I'm sitting there watching my character's life just fade away, and Onka's there alone, fighting 6 other dudes in this house, and I'm thinking please survive. Please survive. I cannot die right now. You cannot die. This is not where this ends. And then we actually succeed. And Josh is sitting there just I don't know what to, I guess we're going to do this now because this was not supposed to happen.
And I mean, that session, that was pretty incredible because I remember we were doing 2 different stories at the same time. So we'd follow you and we'd snap back to us, And what me and Becca, our position is that we were in jail.
Yeah.
And that was a really, really fun point of the stories because we had to plan our escape. And it was really cool because while you guys were doing your part of the story, we'd step to the side and we'd start planning and doing these big details. And what we found out is that there was enough materials in there for me to mimic the guy's big voice. And when they'd open the door, we'd attack. Ours didn't go as successful as yours.
It started really well.
We started very well. I made a big hand to scare people, but then I rolled a very low number, and it just kind of looked like a high five.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was all downhill. I forgot exactly what happened, but somehow we ended up knocked out with 1 health back on the floor of our jail cell.
So, how would you convince other people to start playing the game if our conversation isn't enough?
I would just say that it's like most things. You have to give it a chance, but this is one of the few things I could say almost without a shadow of a doubt. If you were to try it, I could guarantee you would enjoy it if you really applied yourself. And not that it even takes that much effort. Really, just show up and be willing to have an open mind and just have a good time with your friends. That's really all it is. It's not much different than, when you go home and you play video games with your friends or any sort of other activity. If you're surrounded by people that you have a lot in common with or not even, it puts you in these situations where you can look at things from a different perspective, quite literally, because you're doing it through your hero's perspective, so to speak. And you build friendships with all the other heroes and villains so along the way. And once you've accomplished that, you really get to know the people in real life a lot better. And there's really not a lot of negative that could be said about the game, in my opinion. It allows you to be more creative, build friendships, because we're going to remember these when we're 40, and we're going to be talking about it like it actually happened, even though it happened at this table with some paper.
Yeah, for sure. Because like I said earlier, if you can just even observe one game, that would be a great primer to it. Playing it is even more inclusive. But it is easily, it's the best kind of social event. Because not only is I like playing video games online with my friends, but there's still the kind of barrier that I'm not really with them. I can hear them and we can talk and sort of interact, but being here in person, getting to share some pizza, flip a table, we're getting fired up all together. That is a much different social experience.
Well, I think a good metaphor for it would be is if you look at D&D and you're in a car, if you play whether it be board games or I don't mean tabletop games. I mean board games, video games or movies or any sort of media that you like to ingest. You would be going on a track. Not that that's not perfectly enjoyable. It's perfectly fine. You're just going in a track and you're enjoying everything. But D&D would be more similar to we're going on a cross-country 4,000-mile road trip.
Off-road the entire time.
Off-road, no plates. And we're going to see what happens along the way.
I would completely agree. So, guys, if you are out there and you've heard about Dungeons & Dragons, you've thought about it, you think maybe it's a little too dorky for you, please give it a try. It will especially benefit your creative mind. And thank you, Charlie, so much for sitting down with me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Where can we find you online if you're doing anything interesting?
Well, now I need to find my social media to add and plug myself shamelessly. I'm not too active, but I do have a few great tennis picks.
Heck yeah.
So you could find me at Instagram at Charlie, CHARLIE 7156.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.